This is Alliance 100th anniversary hat.
Put it on. Put it on.
Somebody made that comment in the last week's tale that I had to keep my head covered. Oh, do we have a winner with us today? Let me tell you. This young lady over here to my right has been honored by the state of Texas. She has won all kinds of honors locally, and I've known her for a good number of years when she worked at Providence Hospital. She's the executive director for the Advocacy Center for the Children, and she has worked with police. She's worked with the FBI. There's a former FBI agent right there. She's done so much work. It would take me another hour to show you all the things that she has done. But she is a fabulous executive director. As I said, she was picked the #1 in the whole state of Texas, Susan Oliva.
Hand out some information. I'll then pass it and I'll share it. I feel it's quickly right now.
Thank you.
For those of you here, I just passed out some information about the Advocacy Center, and I'm just going to ask a general question. This is our 26th year of operation in El Paso. We are the only children's advocacy center serving El Paso County, but I'm just going to ask, do any of you have an idea what the Advocacy Center does? Have you ever heard of the Children's Advocacy Center? One shaking his head, yes? Well, then it's very good that I'm here today so that I can talk about the Advocacy Center. You know what? That's actually good because most people know about the Advocacy Center, unfortunately, because one of their children was sexually assaulted or severely beaten in El Paso County. Those are the kids that come to our doors. Those are the kids that we assist. And typically, how a child will be referred to us is maybe that child talked to a teacher, maybe that child talked to a cousin, another parent, and just said, you know what, this is what's happening at home. That person makes the call to 911 or to the CPS hotline number. And within our building, we work with everyone who investigates crimes against children. We are not investigators. We are more on the healing side once that child is identified as being victimized. And you may think, well, you know, teachers, schools really impact the children reporting child abuse. And when things were going online, things were a little bit different last year than any other year. And definitely reports of child abuse have increased. But people think, well, you know what, you probably weren't very busy in 2020 because of the COVID. And I'm going to just talk about 2020, give you an idea, and then I'll talk about some of the materials that I handed out. But the Advocacy Center last year in 2020 was the least number of children that we assisted in our history, and this is going in our 26th year. So last year we helped 506 children victimized by severe physical or sexual abuse in El Paso County. The majority of the caseload, about 85% of our kids, are identified as sexually abused children. So the majority of our caseload is sexual abuse. We don't charge for our services, everything we do, and I'll get more into that of what we do in just a moment. But in a 12-month period, we had 506. This year alone, we have felt an increase. Just last month, we helped 67 kids. So teachers being in touch with kids, you can imagine if a child is living with a person who is abusing them, and they have a camera, we have a camera here, that is their only avenue towards school. They're not going to tell a teacher, they're not going to tell somebody that that person is abusing them. So the numbers of reports, the numbers of people talking to their children really went down last year. But I want you to think about these numbers. 2020, last year, we helped 106 boys. You know what? People think that boys can't be victimized. That's so untrue. Boys are also victimized. We helped 400 girls last year. More alarming, Think about these numbers. 123 children that we assisted were under the age of 6 last year. 246 children were between the ages of 7 and 12. And 137 children were between the ages of 13 and 17. So just keep those numbers. Usually the highest number of children that we assist are between 7 and 12, but we always see more than 100 children under the age of 5. So just keep that in mind when you're talking about children and being victimized. 103 of our children last year received a sexual assault or a SANE examination. So they were sexually assaulted, it happened within a 48-hour window, and they were able to go to the hospital to get a rape exam. These are little ones. 982 specialized trauma-focused mental health therapy sessions were provided. I told you we work with law enforcement and those that are actually investigating crimes against children, but it allows us to focus on the healing. It allows us to focus on the counseling, help with the victim's compensation application, relocation, things that we can do to help that child heal. If we do our job well, if we succeed, that child is not just a victim, but a survivor and ultimately a thriver. I mean, that is our goal, to help these kids to heal from this abuse that's happened. We had 2,088 multidisciplinary team cases coordinated with Child Protective Services. That means that those reports that go to CPS, that they're calling into that hotline number, we are actually reviewing them in-house as well, just to make sure a sexually abused child doesn't slip through the cracks. Some of those reports, you can imagine, can be 12 pages in length, and it's not till you get to the last page and it says, and by the way, sexual assault. Well, if we see that, then we will help to get that child to the center so that they can receive a forensic interview and receive services from the Advocacy Center. 506 children were interviewed by our professionals at the facility. The Advocacy Center, we have specially trained neutral fact-finding people that actually conduct the interview. They work for the Advocacy Center. They don't work for law enforcement. They work with law enforcement. They work with, I have to walk around. Sorry, I'm going to be off, but that's just me. They work with all the agencies who investigate crimes against children. So in our facility, and we are really, really lucky, blessed to be on the Leamore Children's Home campus, and in our building, we have the entire Crimes Against Children section of the El Paso Police Department, which is currently 14 detectives, 2 sergeants, a lieutenant, and a clerk. They're co-housed with us. That is their office. They have nowhere else that they can go. It's to our building, Children's Advocacy Center. We have 8 CPS specialized investigators. These are folks that are on call, that are working in our building to work these cases that are identified this week. We have space for the county attorney. County attorney in El Paso County is the ones who are involved in children hurting children that meets the criteria of severe physical or sexual abuse. Well, when we say children hurting children, that's about 167 cases a year. That is the criteria to bring these kids to the Advocacy Center. The rest would be an adult perpetrator, and we work with the DA to do that. With those folks that work within our building, it's wonderful because we facilitate the team. So everybody's working together to make sure they're working in the best interest of that child. If the child makes an outcry of abuse through that interview, then we can focus on the healing. And I gotta tell you, this is my 26th year at the Advocacy Center, and the founding director, and the greatest honor that I've gotten since I've been there is my adults have grown up, my children, my victims have grown up. They've gone to UTEP, they've gone to community college, and they've come back in as a volunteer because they want to help other kids that have gone through this process who are victimized. So they can heal, they can become thrivers, they can get over this horrible experience that brought them to our doors in the first place. In the material that's before you, you can see this is our brochure, and it tells you kind of what we do at the Advocacy Center, and you're all welcome to look at that. This is our newsletter. It was the last one we had. It was in spring of 2020. And this was the event that never happened. In 2020, we had to cancel our fundraiser because of COVID. And the board hasn't felt comfortable having in-person fundraisers since, so I'm hoping we can have a fundraiser next year because we need those dollars so that we can match state and federal dollars that require us to have a 25% match. So that's been a little tough because we haven't been able to have a fundraiser, but we wanted to honor Jaime Esparza, who had been our district attorney since we started the Advocacy Center. We've been around 25 years, he's been around 28 years, so he was a real key player in getting us up and running. If you look in the newsletter, these are kids and these are cases that came through our center back in 2019. And, you know, I hope that you'll have an opportunity to read those. Those are real cases and how we were able to assist those kids that came through our door. And at the end, we talk about essential services provided and what help and what people can do for us. The reason why El Paso actually came together and developed a Children's Advocacy Center, we're the only ones. You can't just put a sign on your door and that says Children's Advocacy Center. We have to get a lot of protocols and MOUs and everything signed that says the chief of police, the sheriff's office, the Anthony police, the CPS folks are all going to work together as a Children's Advocacy Center to really help these kids to find healing and to find services. But I'm going to give you an example of a case that came through. This has been a few years back, but I want it to hit home and resonate with you why we need a Children's Advocacy Center and why we're there to assist these kids. Before everybody worked together, things didn't go as well as they could have gone because CPS did talk to PD, but maybe it was 2 days after they already found the child was victimized. Or maybe PD, well, maybe they found out that it didn't happen in the city, it happened in the county, it really involved the sheriff's office, but not the police department. So there was a few cracks in communication and the way things go. But this little girl haunts me to this day, and I just want to tell you about her case. This was a little girl. She was 6 years old when she was identified as being a victim. On a Monday morning, she told her mom, you know, Mom, Dad's been touching me, it's bad, I feel bad. And her mom said, honey, you know what, let's not talk about that. Get up, get ready, it's time for school, let's go, let's go, let's go. So a little girl got dressed, went to school. She's first grade, first period. During that first period, she was very fidgety. She was having a really hard time concentrating. The teacher noticed that she was antsy and something wasn't right. After the first period, the teacher approached her and said, you know, is everything okay? Is there something going on? The first grader told her teacher, my dad's been touching me and it's really bad. Well, the teacher was a brand new teacher, and anyone who's a professional teacher, doctor, nurse, you have to report child abuse. It's the law. Well, this teacher kind of a little paranoid because she got this outcry from the child. So she says, you know what, honey, this is important. Wait just a minute. Let me get the counselor. We're going to help you. So she runs out of the classroom. She runs down the hall. She brings back the counselor. And now this little girl has to tell the counselor, who she's not real familiar with, but she had to tell her, well, yeah, my dad's been touching me and it's been really bad. Counselor said, you know what, honey, this is really, really important. You better tell the school nurse. So they took her out of the class. They walked her down the hall. All her friends saw her walking down the hall. And she had to tell the nurse, well, you know, my dad's touching me. These are bad things that are happening. Well, they didn't leave it alone. They found the principal. But they couldn't find the principal, so they found the vice principal. And the vice principal went in and said, hey, what's going on? Tell me what's going on. And she's like, well, you know, my dad's touching me. These bad things are happening. The school still didn't leave it alone. They found the principal, and yet this little girl had to tell the principal that her dad had been touching her and bad things were happening. Okay. Well, the principal did what he was supposed to do. He called 911. Have any of you ever called 911? Well, you're not holding a long time, but anyway, you call 911. They made the report, and eventually a patrol car arrived at the school. So you have to envision a 6-year-old. All her friends saw her dragged into the principal's office, and then a police car came and took her away. So this little girl was humiliated. This little girl was just beside herself. The patrol officers brought her to the advocacy center, and I was the one that opened the door for this little girl. And she was sobbing, she was crying. And she told me first thing when I opened the door, she's like, you know what? I'm not talking to anybody about anything. Just call my mom. I want to go home. That's it. I don't want to talk about it. Okay. Think about Monica's story. How many people did she choose to tell? How many did she choose to tell? One. Well, she told her mom first, and then she told her teacher. Teacher paid attention, but mom didn't pay attention. Fortunately, and she did, she was true to her word. She did not talk to the forensic interviewer. She did not talk to anybody about the abuse. But the detective had enough in that report, and they were able to go and confront Dad and say, well, you know what, this is what's happening, this is what your little girl said. And he was so shocked at being confronted that day, he made a full confession, and he'd been having full sexual relations with this little girl for 6 months. That Monday, it was so violent and it was so upsetting for her, she chose to tell somebody. But I gotta tell ya, do you think she would have told anybody ever again? Because of the way the system worked for her? I don't think she would have. I honestly believe that you hear about 10-year-olds that run away from home. I think this little girl would have been a perfect candidate for that. Dad did plead guilty. Dad was sentenced to 17 years, and he did go to prison for the sexual assault of his child. But those are the cases that we are assisting. We have changed the system. We have helped educate the teachers, the principals, that you don't make a child relive their attack over and over again. When you get the outcry, you do what you're supposed to do. You make that report and let the professionals who have the power to do something about it work together to do something about it. Because that principal couldn't have changed that child's life. That principal could never arrested the father. So it's so important that we work as an MDT or multidisciplinary team to assist these children to heal so that they grow up and they are the thrivers. I mean, that is what we really, really hope to achieve, but that doesn't stop kids from coming to our door, unfortunately, every single day. Yes, ma'am?
What ended up happening with the young lady? I mean, she was then back home. Do you all find another home for her? I mean, what do you all do?
On that particular case, mom just wasn't listening, but she was willing to protect. And so the dad was arrested, and he did bail out, but he wasn't living with the family at that point till it went to trial or went to court. But we work with CPS, and some of our kids do go to foster care because there is no other place that's safe to keep that child. Probably the longest that a child and family has been at our center, because we're not a shelter, they're not living with us, was 21 hours. It took that long to find grandma and grandpa up in Las Cruces and have them come down, and then they put the grandchild with the grandparents, which is our choice, to go with someone they know, and versus going into foster care with strangers. We hope that they go with someone that they're already familiar with. But we do have a huge donation closet because folks give us donations, and if we know the child's going into foster care, we set them up with a week's worth of, we give them shoes, socks, underwear, jeans, whatever the weather is. If we have the resources to share that information or share those articles, we do for the kids when we know they're going into foster care.
Back home.
She did go to mom, but mom did come around. When after dad confessed on that particular case, mom protected because dad admitted he had done it. Yes, sir.
Many years ago, I heard you speak, and I decided, against my better judgment, to ask you an example. And for me, your example was so traumatic. It had to do with kids that were abused, and the attitude of the mother, I think, was, well, this happened to me, so it's your turn. And for me, the idea that a mother would accept casually that this is a normal thing definitely affected me, and I also realized that it takes a very, very special type of personality to deal with that and not come home and cry all night.
I tell you, it's an honor that when my kids, because I've been there 26 years, some of them were 3 when they came, and now they're adults and they're going to college, but when they come back, I guess we've changed, but not as much as they've changed, and they kind of remember us, and they remember the center, and it's thrilling to me that they're coming back to help kids that were in their shoes 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 18 years ago. I mean, to me, that is just so wonderful, because they're thriving, they're becoming nurses, they're becoming social workers. They've grown up, and they've dealt with it, and they have healed. I'm not gonna say they forgot, nobody forgets, but they've healed, and they are going to be hopefully healthy adults and healthy with their children. And I know we've had so many cases, but you know, it kills me too when you have a great grandfather who abused his daughters, who abused his great granddaughters, and had the ability to abuse the great granddaughters. You have 4 generations that are damaged by one man, and you're thinking, why, as a parent, would you, if you were abused, let your child go with your father to possibly suffer that same abuse? And we've had that. You hear about the cycle of abuse, and you have to break that cycle, or it will unfortunately continue. And we've had lots of cases like that.
How about the children that are autism? Do you cater them too?
We will help kids. My interviewers are trained to assist kids that have autism. And we also help adult protective services. If we have an adult who's mentally functioning at 7 or 8, as a child, we'll have adults come in as well that are actually being investigated in case of sexual abuse through adult protective services.
What is the ratio between a little girl and a boy?
You know, about a third of our cases are little boys, but I believe that's because it's underreported. I think it's equal. I think there's just as many boys that are victimized as girls. They're just not likely to tell. And I've had a father in my playroom say, you know what, this didn't happen. My son's not gay. This didn't happen. And it has nothing to do with sexuality. It has to do with power and control, and the fact that someone raped that child, be it a boy or a girl. So I think it's equal. I just think the little boys are less likely to report or tell somebody.
Thank you.
Can I just make one comment? You know, in the past, we've had speakers who talked to us about grandparents that are raising children. And in the past, I've always thought, well, that's because the parents were involved with drugs. And today, I kind of came to the conclusion that it's not just the drugs. It's situations such as this, where there isn't a safe place for the child in the home, and the grandparents have to take over. And the real surprising thing for me, at least, was how many kids are in that situation.
It's a huge number. It truly is a huge number of grandparents raising children. Absolutely is a huge number. But, you know, the basic horrific fact that brings a child to my door, that's why those of you who've never heard of Children's Advocacy Center, I'm glad, because that means that no child personally has touched you that needed our services. But the numbers don't go down. I mean, they went down in 20, which scared me to death, because I knew they were at home with a person hurting them, and we were never going to get those kids. But since they've gone back to school, the numbers have changed, and we are receiving kids and those reports again. But whenever anything changes drastically, it scares me, because the abuse doesn't stop, it doesn't go down. So, but COVID changed the way that people report.
So you're able to get convictions on most of the people that are reported?
Well, you know, 2020 has been horrible as far as backlogging cases and things being able to go to court, because the courthouse is not open right now for regular business and jury trials. So it's kind of put things back. But we hope that, yes, that we hope that the child has an opportunity to have the prosecution have their voices heard. Even if the juries don't convict the person that hurt the child, it's very healing for the child to be able to go to court and be able to say, you know what, this happened, and it gives them an opportunity for their voice to be heard. So we're real excited about that. Yes, we want every perpetrator to be sentenced, but I have to be real, and that doesn't always happen. And
It's like half and half times, or?
probably about 50%, but that's also as jurors. If you can't envision that a child could be raped, then your likeliness of voting guilty is very slim. If you can't believe it could happen, then it's probably gonna come back as a not guilty plea, unfortunately. And so, and I know we're out of your scope because it's not vision, but you know what, we're trying to support 16 families that came through our doors with food packages for Thanksgiving. So if you can help us out with like a turkey or something to go with those, so we can get like sides and food for them, that would be really, really helpful for us at the center. So, any other questions? I'm gonna ask you again, do
Okay.
y'all know what a children's advocacy center is?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a very, thank you, you can come right up here for a moment, do whatever.
It's such a sobering topic, and I'm so happy you're there to help these kids. Thank you. It's a really tough job, really tough job. So we have a little appreciation certificate for you for doing what you do. We really appreciate it. And
Look this way, thank you.
we have Mr. Betty Crocker. He bakes for us.
Yummy!
So we have homemade goods for
It's
us.
heavy, this is awesome, thank you.
So a little treat, trick or treat here. So we always learn something. It seems like every Friday I learn something.
Definitely.
And so I really appreciate
can't
all of
stand
our
behind
important,
podiums.
our speakers.
You did great, you did great.
And so now for something a little bit lighter hearted, we're gonna have a raffle. We're gonna be winners here today. Okay, we have 525.
Now, let me get close to where the best buddies is.
What do you refer to?
And the Democrat.
I'm 17.
That's where it's supposed to be.
Where?
We know who they're trained by now.
Great job.
You're right. Last three. Does anybody have 525 in the last three?
585, it's after me.
I do.
No?
Mr. Carlos, is he? He always wins.
Yes.
501. 501.
No?
All right.
Oh, thank you.
Enjoy. Our next one is 512. 512.
That's me.
There we go. We got a guy with the big bucks. And now 497. Who's the winner? Who is the lucky winner?
497.
497.
Pull another one. That's that.
Okay. PDT John has that. He's passed it on now. 483.
Thank you, Nikki.
483.
Those were early birds.
Right here.
Come and get your prize.
Oh, he always.
Oh, he always wins.
483.
It pays to come to the Paso Downtown Lions Club meeting.
A Booker bag.
And there's one more. That's all yours. Thank you for coming. And we have 518.
That's you.
That's me.
Ta-da!
Hey.
Nice.
That's me.
Don't even have to get up.
What am I kidding?
Thank you,
What am I
Lion
kidding?
Sandy, for bringing all the raffle prizes and taking and selling all the tickets. Thank you very much.
That's for you.
Well, thank you.
We have some more Tom Lee
You want me to just take my
brochures
phone without
left over from
being
last
seen?
week if anybody wants
That's
them.
Thank you.
That's perfect for you.
He gave me a bag and a bottle.
If you're gonna want to speak every week. Please come back anytime. Every Friday we're here. So if there is nothing else for the good of Lionism, we stand adjourned.
Great job, Susan. Great job.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, great job.
Bob, you see him right there?
No, he